Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to episode 37 of Evil Angels, Demons, and the Occult, The Dark World. In this episode, we're going to close out Appendix 3, Who Were the Sons of God Who Married Earthly Women? Genesis 6, Could They Be Angels? And also, we'll be closing out the book, Evil Angels, Demons, and the Occult, The Dark World. All right, so let's get going here. Recapping what we have said, we have found that throughout history, there have been a number of excellent Bible commentators who have believed and taught that the sons of God mentioned in Genesis 6 were actually fallen or evil angels. It is believed that these supernatural beings came to earth, took human women for wives, and then produced a race of half-human, half-angelic beings known as the Nephilim. The results were catastrophic. Indeed, evil filled the entire earth. This led the Lord to send a global flood, which destroyed all humanity except for Noah and his family, and all the animals except for those upon the ark. Now, here's the question. Is this what took place? Were these sons of God actually angels? There have been a number of arguments listed in favor of this point of view. So to answer this question, we first looked at 20 things that everyone can agree upon when the biblical narrative of the flood and its aftermath are examined. This is our starting point, and we often refer back to these points in our evaluation of this theory of angelic interference with humans. Furthermore, as we have documented, each argument for the angelic view has a reasoned response. In fact, the overwhelming evidence from Scripture is that these sons of God were humans, not angels. We can summarize the main arguments for the angelic view and the responses to them as follows. First, the angelic view is an ancient view. Nobody denies this. Yet it was not the only view that was held in antiquity. Indeed, many ancients believed that the sons of God were humans. However, as we mentioned, the real issue is not whether a view is ancient or not, but rather, does the Bible teach it? There are those who argue that angels is the obvious way in which the text should be understood in Genesis chapter 6. Nevertheless, we might ask the question, why wasn't the specific term angel used in Genesis 6 if this was the identity of the sons of God? Indeed, since the same author, Moses, used the word angel 15 times in the first 5 books of the Bible to specifically refer to these heavenly messengers, why not in this context? This would be especially true if they were one of the primary causes for the flood. Now, the likely answer for this omission is that we're not dealing with angels, but rather with humans. The Hebrew phrase translated sons of God is often said to be a technical phrase which always refers to angels. However, this is not true since it is also used in Scripture of humans. While the phrase could refer to angels in Genesis 6, it is not the language, but rather the context, which is the determining factor. As we emphasize, the context does not indicate that these sons of God were angels. So, contrary to the claim of those who hold the angel view, another point is the phrase took wives in Hebrew is the standard way in which the Bible refers to legitimate marriages in the Old Testament. In other words, there was nothing sinister about these marriages between the sons of God and the daughters of humankind. In fact, the natural way to understand the phrase would be the joining of one man and one woman. And there's something else. Contrary to what is claimed, the angelic view does not seem to be the obvious view of this passage, or even the likely view. In fact, the entire 6th chapter of Genesis emphasizes that we are dealing with the gross sins of human beings, not angels, which caused the flood to be sent by the Lord. In other words, it was the human sin, not angelic sin, that caused the flood. Indeed, the Lord had said he was fed up with the human race because of their repugnant sins. Therefore, he sent a flood to judge the evil humans. Nothing is stated about angels being punished for any role in causing the flood. Now, while certain passages in the New Testament are cited to support the angel view, we find that when examined more closely, they do no such thing. In fact, 2 of them, rather than speaking of an angelic fall immediately before the time of the flood, are actually referring to the original rebellion of certain angels. This rebellion likely took place before our world was created. And finally, there are those that say the angel view must be correct because all of the other explanations have many problems. While there may be certain difficulties with other views, as we have seen, there are enormous issues with the angelic view, which makes it difficult, if not impossible, to accept. Furthermore, there are at least two possible views of the sons of God as humans, which make perfect sense in the overall context of Genesis. This includes the view that the sons of God are the offspring of Seth, and the view that the sons of God is merely another way of stating that they were males. Either of these two views will work in the context of the Genesis flood. Consequently, what we saw is that every reason offered in favor of the angelic view has a sensible answer that refutes the claim. Now, in addition to this, there are also 3 general problems as well as 20 specific problems with the angel view. The first general problem can be stated as follows. There is a very important rule of biblical interpretation that difficult passages must be interpreted in light of the clear ones. Since this is admittedly a difficult text, it must be interpreted in light of the totality of the teaching of the Bible. In other words, unless other passages clearly teach the angelic view of the sons of God as angels, then we should not use this one passage to establish our teaching on the subject. In other words, this should not be the control passage. Secondly, we should never make a doctrine out of a controversial text when there are other good options as to its meaning. Therefore, since the angelic interpretation is beset with many problems, as we have noticed, it should not be used to create a biblical doctrine. And finally, a third general problem is that each argument for the angelic view, and we looked at 14 of them, has a reasonable response to it. If we add this to the 2 previous general problems, we then conclude that the sons of God are fallen angels. That view should never be seen as the answer to this problematic question as to the identity of these personages mentioned in Genesis chapter 6, verses 2 and verse 4. In other words, you've got 2 general problems, and a third general problem is basically that the reasons given that we looked at, the 14 of them, don't make the case. So right there should be enough in and of itself to reject the angelic view. Now we've got a however. However, these are not the only difficulties associated with the angel view. Indeed, there are many specific problems that arise when one attempts to defend it, problems that have no solutions to them. To begin with, there is a huge problem. There is nothing in the context of the Genesis flood account which remotely suggests that angels were involved in this episode. Everything in the context of Genesis leading up to the flood, as well as its aftermath, stresses the sins of humans. As we indicated 9 times in the flood account, the sins of humans are mentioned, but angels or their sins are never mentioned. This alone should make the angel view highly suspect. In fact, and here's really the key, if it weren't for this one phrase, sons of God, found in Genesis chapter 6, verses 2 and 4, then nobody would have ever assumed that sinful behavior of angels would have had anything to do with the Lord sending the flood. Furthermore, the meaning of the Hebrew phrase translated sons of God is unclear. In fact, there are a number of possible options as to what it could mean, and this includes angels, other supernatural beings, regular human beings, a special class of humans, or ancient rulers. The fact that there are various possibilities must be appreciated. Now, while the word refers to heavenly beings in the first chapter of Job, and of course we don't deny that, it is the context which makes it clear. Indeed, these beings are in heaven appearing in the presence of the Lord. However, in Genesis 6, the context refers to events that take place solely upon the earth, not in heaven. One of the main refutations of the sons of God being angels is found in Deuteronomy chapter 14 and verse 1. In this verse, Israel is told, "You are the sons of the Lord," or Yahweh, your God. Now, this is clearly a reference to the sons of God as human beings. Now, interestingly and very importantly, it is the only time apart from Genesis 6 that this phrase is used in the first 5 books of Scripture. Therefore, since it is obviously referring to humans in this context, nobody should claim that this Hebrew phrase applies to angels and to them alone. Now, here's something else. As we saw, the sons of God in Job refers to good angels, or another type of righteous heavenly beings. We are told that they were the ones who praised the Lord when the universe was created, Job 38:7. Therefore, the clear reference to sons of God in Job is to beings who did not follow this personage who became the devil or Satan. In other words, they are good angels or other some type of righteous beings. And we gave a number of illustrations where it talks about the holy ones in heaven. Whenever it refers to them, it's always righteous beings that it's referring to. Now, as we mentioned, this brings up a problem for the angel view. Should we then assume that beings mentioned in Genesis 6, if angels were good angels who finally decided to sin? If so, we have another angelic rebellion, some 2,000 years after the original creation, the original angel rebellion. But this is something the Bible knows nothing about, a second angelic rebellion. Yet if we assume they were angels who originally fell away from the Lord, then they would be evil angels. Here's your other option. If this is the case, if they were evil angels to begin with, why would the Lord call them sons of God? He never does this anywhere else in Scripture. Indeed, as we saw every other time evil angels are mentioned in Scripture, there is something in the context by which we know that they are evil. In other words, they're never given any description that would link them directly to the Lord. In fact, in describing them, Jesus in Matthew 25 referred to the devil and his angels. They certainly do not belong to the Lord. And we have another huge problem for those who hold the angel view. Only humans were punished in the Genesis flood. There is no guilt assigned to angels and no punishment for them. Since humans would basically have been victimized if the angel view is correct, then it is unheard of that the Lord would punish the victims and not the victimizers. Another problem has to do with relationship between the sons of God and daughters of men. Scripture said they married. In other words, legitimate marriages. In fact, the Hebrew phrase that is used is the standard expression in the Old Testament for legal marriages. Yet, the only legitimate marriages that the Bible approves of are those between one man and one woman. Now, we add to this, Jesus made it clear that angels do not marry. Therefore, the Bible would never call a union between angels and earthly women as a marriage. However, Scripture says this is precisely what took place between the sons of God and the daughters of men. And we also have the problem of angels producing children. The fact that angels are spirit beings, neither male nor female, and thus have no ability to procreate. This truth seemingly rules out the possibility that they could marry earthly women and then have children born to them. Thus, the angelic theory advocates something that is impossible. It advocates something impossible, that is, angels can have offspring. Now, there's also a problem with the people known as the Nephilim. From Scripture, we learn a few things about them. First, they were on the earth before the time the sons of God took wives from the daughters of humankind. In other words, they were not a result of the union between them, and therefore not the reason that God sent the flood, because they were already there before the sons of God married the daughters of humankind. Second, they were called mighty men, heroes of old. This is describing human beings very clearly. Furthermore, it is a positive term. If they were the result of an angelic human union, then they would not be called mighty men or heroes. And third, we find later in the book of Numbers that the Nephilim were related to a human ancestor, a man named Anak. These facts lead to one simple conclusion. We are dealing with humans, not angels. Let's also remember that Jesus said at the time of his second coming, it would be similar to the days of Noah leading up to the flood. What did he say? People married and were given in marriage. Indeed, there would be nothing out of the ordinary. Notice that the Lord said that people would be marrying. He did not say angels. So the logical assumption here is that life was going on as usual, will be going on as usual until the moment of the flood. That's what we're told. And it will be the same thing at the time of the end, life going on as usual. And when the people died as a result of the flood, they were not expecting it to happen. Okay, furthermore, if angels somehow were able to procreate with human women, we ask this question: in what sense could the offspring be called humans? They obviously could not. However, this is how the Bible describes the offsprings of the sons of God and the daughters of men, namely as humans. Now, there's something else we emphasize, and that's the answer to what happened in the days of Noah should be decided in the Bible and by it alone. Indeed, we should never, and so many people do this, unfortunately, never consider a forgery, such as the Book of Enoch, to answer this question. As we noted, the so-called Book of Enoch is actually a compilation of a group of writings written between the Testament that have nothing whatsoever to do with the patriarch Enoch. It is of no value whatsoever in deciding the identity of the sons of God, so we do not pay attention to it. Finally, if we view the first 4 verses of Genesis as an appendix to Genesis chapter 5 and not as an introduction to the story of the flood, then the sons of God and their marriages to the daughters of humankind would not be viewed as anything evil whatsoever. Basically, this would mean that Genesis 6, 1-4 merely summarizes the fact that the sons of God and the daughters of Adam and Eve had greatly increased, they married and had children. These 4 verses are an interlude before the narrative of the flood. Consequently, the sons of God were simply human men, nothing more. So to sum up, in fact, of all the reasons given for the sons of God being angels have more than an adequate response to each one of them, and we add to this the 3 general problems associated with making this a biblical doctrine, and also with the specific problems that the angelic view creates, we conclude that this understanding of Genesis 6 is not built upon a solid scriptural foundation. Therefore, we believe it is best to view these sons of God as human beings and nothing more. Again, 14 reasons why, all have answers. 3 general problems with it, 20 specific problems. All of this tells us that the best way to view the sons of God in Genesis 6 is as human beings and nothing more. Finally, we conclude, consequently, there should be no claims of the return of the Nephilim in the last days, as some have done. Scripture gives many signs with respect to the time of the end, signs that we have documented in our book. 25 signs we're near the end. These signs do not include angels returning to earth and taking earthly women and producing some type of monstrous offspring. This type of teaching that this is going to happen at the time of the end should cease and desist. And with this, we conclude the book, Evil Angels, Demons, and the Occult, as we conclude Appendix 3, where the sons of God in Genesis chapter 6, angels. And we saw very clearly they are not. They are human beings. I'm Don Stewart. Again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time as we begin and we continue on recording other books dealing with biblical truths. Until then, may the Lord richly, richly bless you.